For those of you who don't know, I'm Daniel Howling, the president of the Beacon Hill Area Neighborhood Association. Thank you very much. First time back doing it live. We went live last month, but I was too scared to come back, so I'm sitting a little bit, but I got my sea legs again. So first up, the adoption of the agenda. We got an agenda. So do you have any last minute changes or amendments to the agenda?
I move to approve as written.
Do you have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Now the approval of the general meeting minutes from last month. Everybody check those out in your newsletter. Too much this weekend. Anyone feel like there's any amendments we need to make there? And a motion to approve the minutes from last month.
I move to approve.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right along. So announcements and on the business, I believe you want to make an announcement.
So there's a big forum, it's called Neighbor Helping Neighbor Forum. It actually originated in Beacon Hill's Neighbor Helping Neighbor Committee. And 3 of Beacon Hill great neighbors will be on a couple of the panels, Chris Spilker and myself and who's the third one? Kim Hoogley. And I hope you all can make it. It's free, lunch will be provided. It's at the Methodist Church, the Lowell Heights Methodist Church in their gym. It starts at 10 and it goes to 4, which sounds like horrible, but there'll be 4 panels. There'll be some cool like neighborhood, figuring out things between neighborhoods, and you'll get to hear how best serve your neighbors in your community. And I want to make the announcement that Susan did not copy the last newsletter I did, so that's why she won't never make that mistake.
And the date is July 6th.
July 16th.
16th, yeah.
I'll be putting it on.
Is it in the?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I know I meant to. This is the
Next up, our SAFFE Officer, Officer Maciel is not here this evening. So we have Chief Reyes and Officer Hosa.
All right, good evening, everyone. How you doing? Good. All right. Thanks for having us out here. I'm Chief Reyes. I'm one of the assistant chiefs. I'm over the Operations Bureau. An Operations Bureau, for anybody that's wearing a uniform and driving a marked car, is assigned to the Operations Bureau. So, and Officer Hinojosa is with us. Officer, did you go by Jesse or?
Jesus Hinojosa, and I go by Jesse.
Okay, he'll introduce himself a little bit further. I just have a couple of points to discuss with you, and I may have mentioned them to you previously, but they're ones that are important that we want to be sure that we'll continue to address, but remind you as well too, we're here to provide those services to you. One of them is on the board, homelessness, so I will tell you that we work closely, SAFFE Officers work closely with our partners in DHS, with the outreach advocates, and code compliance if necessary. So we work in coordination with them. Of course, we all know it's a complex issue, but we'll continue to address. Outreach is very important, right? We want to ensure that the people that are experiencing homelessness are provided outreach. So it's not a matter of, hey, call the police, they're going to come out and they're going to ask homeless people to just move away and go somewhere else. We know that housing is an issue. Sometimes people don't want to necessarily go to Haven for Hope, for example, but we have to be able to direct them to alternative resources if possible or if necessary. Okay, so that's one thing we'll continue to address. Along with encampments, they sometimes go together. Right, encampments as well too. They're not areas where we can just go in and call public works and say, hey, there's an encampment, you need to come out and clean it. Again, there's outreach that needs to be done. Code needs to be involved. Public service, the department, the public works department, TxDOT, if they're under the underpasses or overpasses rather, we'll work in coordination with them. If they're under the overpass, we're really the state issue, but we'll work in coordination with them. But again, we want to be compassionate with people and provide them outreach as well too. The issue does get addressed, and you may say, well, why does it happen again. Maybe people new to the area, or maybe people just come back, but we'll continue to address those needs. The other issue is gunfire. This question will come up at various community meetings, like if I hear gunfire in my neighborhood, should I call the police? And we always say, absolutely yes, you do want to call us. We will come out, investigate, try to determine who it is that's been firing their gun. For whatever reason, there are people that think it's okay to go out of their backyard and fire a celebratory round or test fire. That's what gun ranges are for, it's not for your backyard. But more importantly too, we want to be sure that nobody's hurt or injured. That's not gunfire coming from some kind of aggravated assault or shooting occurrence. Okay, that's where we want to come out. If you don't know the exact location, just give us a general idea. We have officers that are out there. And oftentimes, officers are the other gunfire as well too, so they'll be in the area as well too, can respond a little bit quicker, pinpoint the area faster if we have people reporting that. So we'll continue or we'll always address those. People may say, yeah, because you don't catch anybody that drove away. If there's evidence to be collected, we'll collect that evidence. In the particular shell casings, people will say, well, what if we find shell casings? We'll collect those as well too. Every handgun or empty shell casing has a unique identifier that's left by the firing pin, so we can put those into our system, and that information gets collected. We see if there's any correlation with any other type of gun crimes, whether in the same area or in some other part of town. That's why it's important to follow. So we collect that evidence. More importantly, we can identify who is responsible for that. Okay, that's all I have. I'll leave it to Officer Hinojosa to address some of the issues or concerns that have been brought up previously in either other community meetings or through residents who have been contacted. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Hello again, I'm Officer Jesus Hinojosa. I'm new to our Central Safe Unit since January, and I'll be assisting Officer Maselli with this with Beacon Hill area. I came from Dog Watch. I spent 14 and a half years overnight working downtown. I've been on the department for quite some time. So the Safe Unit's new to me, but actually this is my old neighborhood. Growing up, I'm a graduate of Edison High School. I went to St. Anne's Church. My sister's a nun at St. Anne's, and I grew up in this area. I'm glad to be back. A couple of key issues that were brought up to our attention was speeding around Magnolia. There's been citations issued within the last week or so. The encampment at the 1000 block of Capitol across from the park, that was cleaned out on Friday, and I drove by there earlier, and it's still clean. Now the other two properties, code is on that one, and they're supposed to do some kind of cleanup this week or the following week. It just takes time. And there's an address on Mulberry, West Mulberry, 1100 block of West Mulberry. We're helping code with that one as well. They have a meeting tomorrow with a BSB meeting tomorrow on what's going to happen with that location. But there is activity there as far as what we're doing there. We're green stickering, actually code is green stickering vehicles that are parked in the back that can't be there. And other code violations that they're doing. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Ashby and Agony, the drainage ditch, kind of in the boundary where the tracks are. That's been addressed. They did a cleanup. They had to actually remove the steel bar, the iron bars that were welded by the city, and the manholes because the homeless people were getting in there. So that was cleaned out about a month ago, and we'll continue to do patrol-wise. Now, the landscaping, the grass that's in between the residents of that area and the tracks, there was concern last week for illegal dumping. That was taken care of on Friday as well. We had that taken care of. There was a Connex on the, I think it's the 1200 block of West Hollywood, a trailer that was parked there, and the homeless people were getting into that one. So that one's been addressed. They've been removed from that location. I went by earlier and there was nobody there. The owner is going to be moving them shortly. Other than that, we're just doing patrol buys and checking out these abandoned structures, making sure they're still boarded up. What's not boarded up, and we call code and have them re-secured and clean up all the trash. And then besides the highway cleanups as well, that's time consuming. It takes, half a day, most of the day, just depends how busy times are. Any questions for us, for me? Yes, ma'am.
There have been a couple of reports on my Facebook neighborhood group about some appliances being removed from houses that are either for sale or being,
They're being burglarized and they're sitting there.
they're actually stealing the appliances. Are you guys aware of that?
That I'm not. If they're finding them, I don't know when they're reporting it. Do you have a specific address?
I don't remember what their address now, but
Okay.
there have been a couple of reports. One is-
I know I've seen two, but not in the Beacon Hill area. They're
I
in
can
other-
give you a specific address.
Yes, ma'am.
Shortly, I'll look it up again.
It was
It was a few days
On
ago.
Mistletoe?
Mistletoe, yeah.
Do you know the block number, sir?
1,000 block of.
1,000 block of Mistletoe, yeah.
It's a duplex that's for sale right now.
What's Mistletoe?
She managed to get their license plate with their security camera.
Okay.
We checked with our property crimes, we make sure they have a report on that.
Yeah.
You said they have a license plate? Okay.
Yeah, I also good picture, good photos of the perpetrator.
And that's on the detective, if it was reported, the detective should have that information. If not, you said it's on your Facebook? The
She
Beacon Hill area?
definitely reported it.
Okay.
Did they report it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And somebody also mentioned the same thing happened to their neighbor across the street shortly before that. So it's not just like one.
And they appear to be targeting the houses
That are for sale, that are.
Or sale or undergoing
Being
in
constructed.
renovation.
Okay. We'll look into that for now.
Any questions for me? No one here as well too?
I was just curious, what's green stickering a vehicle mean?
Green stickering, you can't use this street as storage. So evidence of a vehicle resident using a street as storage is collecting debris on the windshield you can't even see in. The stickers are expired. Some of them even have inspection stickers, which are no longer a thing. Trash on the wipers, and trash and debris accumulating around the tires. So when we see that, when we drive around, we see that, we make attempts to contact the property owner and give them, the time to move it. If they're not there, then I use like a dirty towel and I clean the windshield as best as I can, or the window, and I put the green sticker. And then in 24 hours, either one of the SAFFE officers, myself, or Officer Maselli, or patrol will see it, and there's a time on there, and it'll get impounded.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned parking in the backyard. Is it, are you not allowed to park vehicles in your backyard?
That's through code. I don't know the law, the literature with code, but they do write like a green sticker, like a warning, this has to be moved by a certain time. I think they give them several weeks to move it out of they're pretty much abandoned vehicles in the backyard, not in the driveway or in the
Yeah.
garage or anything. Yes.
Does that include, what if somebody, we have a neighbor in our neighborhood that has like several junk cars in the back of his house? Is that?
Inside his property,
Yeah.
the code we would address that to code. Do you have an address or you want to talk to me afterwards?
Sure. I can get the address for you and.
Okay.
And on some of those code issues too, if it's strictly a code issue, those can be reported if you'd like to 311. Of course, you can always report them to the SAFFE officer, but you can report them directly to code. You can use 311. You can download the app if you'd like to on your phone.
I have the app, I love
Okay.
the app, so maybe I'll do that.
Yep. You can do that. Like I said, we're open to taking those as well too. If it's strictly code, dead animals, I find it useful myself for certain things.
What is the app that you're referring to?
So there's a 311 app that you can download on your phone. And I'll show you real quick. It looks basically look like this. Just download it, 311 San Antonio. And then basically you can report code issues if there's, say there's an abandoned structure, you can do that. You can take a picture, basically geolocate the property for you. So you just kind of describe what it is. If it's, like I have one here that I reported for dumping on the street, dead animals, and basically just, a few clicks, go through the streets, what the nature of the problem is, and they'll address it. They'll get it to the property department and address it that way.
I don't know if you all have the ear of the people who are configuring that app, but I know when I try to report things in Beacon Linear Park, oftentimes it will not let me because it can't find the park in the GIS system.
Okay. But let me, I can reach out to, I think, Paul Stalker is in charge of 311.
Okay.
And maybe, she could address that issue with the app. Give it the park again.
The Beacon Hill Linear Park.
You're saying they're not coming up on the, when you try to report an issue?
Yeah, when you go to the city, it looks at the geolocation and says, there's no park here, I'm not taking this.
Okay. I can find out. I'll get it to her.
Awesome, thanks so much.
1,000.
And it stretches over like a 6-block
It goes
length,
up,
so
it goes
it's
up.
tricky.
It's a liquor department.
It's not a centralized thing, so it gets confused. I've tried to report some graffiti there, and it's
Okay.
like, what?
Okay. I'll ask him to look into it.
Fantastic, thanks so much.
Yes, sure. Anyone else? If not, we'll appreciate y'all letting us take your reading. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Chief Reyes and Officer Ian meet y'all. And for main events, presentation on homelessness. Our neighborhood does not, it's not as big an issue here as some neighborhoods, but as just taking this from the listening officer, we do have instances of it. And for some people, it's a problem. For some people, it's not a problem. Some people see it as a scourge of the neighborhood, and some people see it as a chance for us to be better neighbors and help people who need help. But whatever your take on it, there's something needs to be done, and there's a chance for us to find out maybe how we can approach it better. I would like to note that our councilman Bravo is here tonight, just an indication of how important this topic is to him also. So thank you for coming tonight. Turn it over to Bill Mahone.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. As mentioned, I'm the Director of Community Engagement at SAFFE, and that stands for the South Alamo Regional Alliance for the Homeless. And I appreciate you having me here. I know homelessness is a big topic in our community and nationwide. So the purpose of this presentation is educational. I will be letting you all know about our local response system, Sarah's role in that response system, and go over some current data and trends. And you'll actually be one of the first audience that gets to see a lot of the data that I present today, because we just had our big count data presentation in late May. So this is very fresh data. And I do have some special people I'm going to introduce at the end, and so I'll go through this as quick as possible and make sure I have time to introduce them so they can talk about their role in our response system, and also have some time for Q&A at the end. So who are we and what do we do? So simply put, SARA is the regional coordinating body on all things homelessness and housing insecurity. Our mission is to ensure everybody has a place to call home in San Antonio and Bexar County. And we are designated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, as the local continuum of care lead agency. And so with that, we're responsible for regional planning around homelessness, and we facilitate just over $14 million annually in HUD funding for the community. We work to improve the performance of our homeless response system. We track progress and outcomes, which in turn results in additional federal dollars for our community. So this chart right here shows our COC governing structure, and you'll see our Continuum of Care Board of Directors. They not only serve as the Board of Directors for the entire continuum in Bexar County, but they also serve as SARA, the agency's Board of Directors, as the collaborative applicant and COC lead. And they also oversee the HMIS system. HMIS stands for Homeless Management Information System, and they're responsible for all the data related to homelessness. And they are a department within Haven for Hope, so we work with them closely. And they also oversee all of our committees in our continuum of care. And we have those listed: our membership council, our youth action board, HMIS advisory committee, point in time count committee, and our coordinated entry and outreach advisory committee. So each serves a very specific and important role within our continuum of care. So as for SARA, the nonprofit, we are not a direct service provider. However, we produce local and federal reports on homelessness. We provide technical assistance to over 50 plus continuum of care membership agencies. And we operate our community's local coordinated entry system called HomeLink. And the coordinated entry system is what connects people to housing options. And I'll touch on more on that later. So before I go any further, you're going to notice me saying people experiencing homelessness a lot. And you may wonder why I use that language. And the reason is that's what's called person-first language. And what that means is putting the person before their circumstance, describing something a person is going through rather than defining them by it. The reason we use this is that, frankly, words matter, and the words we use can make a big difference in how we treat those around us. And we know that labels can not only other groups of people, but also generate strong emotional reactions that create barriers and reinforce stereotypes. So that's why I say currently experiencing homelessness, because homelessness is a temporary thing that people are just going through. It's not who they are. So using person-first language, it humanizes homelessness a little bit more, and it also gives people the experiencing the dignity that they deserve. Because at the end of the day, people experiencing homelessness, they're first and foremost people. They are sons, daughters, brothers, fathers, sisters, and they each have their individual story. So HUD's categories of homelessness. So when you hear the word homelessness, your mind may jump to the image of a person on the street or in an encampment. But HUD actually has 4 official categories of homelessness to address the many different ways that somebody can be experiencing it in the first place, which each of them requiring a different set of housing remedies. And the other reason it's important is that all of these categories that I talked about here, they will be able to be served by the HUD funding that we get as a community. So I'll start off with category 1. Whoops, sorry. So category 1 is literally homeless. And this is the population that is living on the streets, in their car, under bridges, and in our emergency shelters. This is who organizations like Haven for Hope and Christian Assistance Ministries serves in their organizations. And we have a wide range of programs available for people who are experiencing literal homelessness, including shelter with wraparound services, rapid rehousing, which includes rental assistance, and permanent supportive housing. Next is category 2, and that's imminent risk. Now these are individuals and families who are behind on their rent or utility bills and may even have a notice to vacate their unit. This group is serviced by programs like the Emergency Housing Assistance Program, or EHAP, which was greatly expanded during the pandemic. We've seen a surge of people in this category, and excuse me, I'm having issues with my speaker notes. Let me just exit real quick. Sorry. Okay, that worked. So Emergency Housing Assistance Program, that was greatly expanded during the pandemic. It expired, it ran out on March 1st, it was closed, and then it reopened as the Housing Assistance Program, but that just closed on Friday because of the increased demand. So that was less than a month and a half that it was open, to give you an idea of how much this is a need in our community. A new rental assistance application period and the reopening of the application portal is all dependent on additional funds becoming available for our community. What HUD has done, they've looked at communities throughout the nation, and if certain communities are not spending down their housing assistance program funds, they are reassigning those to communities that are showing that they're able to put those to good use. And so San Antonio has been able to get some of those. Next is persistent housing instability, and this is a group that frankly we're learning more about. But what it basically means is it's essentially people who are doubled up or living in crowded housing situations or moving frequently due to housing instability issues. So they don't typically have an active lease or ownership of their housing, and that fact limits their access to certain resources like eviction prevention assistance. We typically see families with children or unaccompanied youth in this category, but we do have some additional housing programs and other programs meant specifically for youth and young adults that we'll talk about later. Category 4, these are individuals and families who are fleeing domestic violence. And it's important to remember we have a shelter and specific resources for this population through family violence and prevention services. But anybody in this category also qualifies for the same set of resources that the other categories do. So they can still present a haven for hope and get assistance there if they need to. Okay, homelessness is also categorized by where the person is living or sleeping. So as I present the point in time count data, you'll hear me talk about sheltered homelessness and unsheltered homelessness. So sheltered homelessness, that means that the person's staying at an emergency shelter, safe haven, or transitional housing, so all temporary housing situations. Unsheltered homelessness refers to staying anywhere not meant for human habitation. So again, the street, vehicle, abandoned building, etc. I put these on the table. I'm not sure if y'all got them yet, but these are our homeless response system resource map. So we created this just this year. We saw a need to have a quick infographic that explained our homeless response system, the different categories of people either at risk or currently experiencing literal homelessness, and the resources available to them and how to access those services. And then on the back, you will see HUD's categories of homelessness, common terminology, and all of our different access points in the community where people can go get an assessment and get added to the housing wait list. I'm going to talk more about coordinated entry now, which is part of our access points. So HomeLink is a uniform and common assessment to connect people experiencing homelessness to the appropriate housing resource. So going left to right, you'll see access, assessment, prioritization, and referral. I'll talk about each of those steps. So it's our job to make sure everyone has proper access to an assessment, whether through an official access point, resource hub, outreach worker, shelter, or otherwise. The assessment process is a series of questions to better understand the person's housing situation. We always look for a real-time solution, but if that is unavailable, we use a standardized tool to determine specific housing needs and vulnerability. Prioritization is the process of determining the order in which our limited housing resources are distributed with the goal of helping the most vulnerable first. In a perfect world, everybody that goes through an assessment would be immediately put in a permanent housing situation, but the fact is we do have limited housing available, so the goal always is to serve those that are the most vulnerable first. And finally, the referral process, that's when we've made the connection of a prioritized individual with the housing provider, and the housing provider takes it from there to get them into housing. So our HomeLink or access hubs or assessment sites, they're available for people at imminent risk of homelessness, meaning that they are going to lose their permanent nighttime residence within 14 days and they don't have a new one identified, or it's available for people experiencing literal homelessness. The two largest hubs that serve as access points are Haven for Hope, that's a walk-in hub. Anybody can present an intake and get an assessment there, or the Homeless Connections Hotline, which is a unique and valuable resource for our city where people can call and fill out a call-in assessment. Okay, so now for the numbers. This data, again, is from our local homeless point-in-time count, which is basically an annual census of how many people are experiencing homelessness in San Antonio and Bexar County on a single night. We conduct the count by sending teams of volunteers all over the community to survey people who are unsheltered, and at the same time, our homeless service providers document those that are staying in their shelters on that same night. Show of hands, has anybody volunteered for a point-of-time count before? Okay, great, wonderful. I know Valerie and Don have. So. COVID, unfortunately, with everything, has affected our point in time count the last 2 years. We were not able to conduct our volunteer-led unsheltered count at all in 2021, which is reflected here in our chart. And while we postponed this year's count from January to March due to the Omicron variant, we're going to look at this year's data as our new baseline coming out of the pandemic. So looking at the chart, you'll first notice a significant dip from 2012 to 2013. And that coincides with Haven for Hope's grand opening. So that's an example right there and the dramatic effect that's had on homelessness in San Antonio and Bexar County. Other than that, you'll see that the numbers over the last 10 years have been fairly flat, even though San Antonio's overall population grew by an estimated 8.1% between the 2010 and 2020 census. So ideally, we want to see this go down, and we're continuing to work on that, but we are encouraged that while the population has been growing, we've still maintained a flat rate. Anecdotally, though, we are concerned that experiences of homelessness could increase due to upstream factors that are causing housing instability, and that could include increased rents, expiring assistance programs, and increases in mental health, substance use, and domestic violence cases. So to better track this, we are working on a new community dashboard, which will launch later this summer, and we're going to report homelessness data on a quarterly basis instead of relying solely on the point in time count, which is an annual thing. And the last thing on this slide, you'll see that those numbers add to around 3,000 people. And we'll sometimes see people refer to that 3,000 number as the full number of people experiencing homelessness in our community. But when you look at a whole year's data of people entering and exiting homelessness, it's more like 8,000 what the number is for a full year. So I want to highlight an area where we've done an incredible job as a community as a result of strong coordination and partnerships between homeless service providers, local government, and a large and targeted gift from USAA. In 2016, we were able to meet federal benchmarks for effectively ending veteran homelessness. And so what this means is we have a housing option in place for every veteran we identify in San Antonio, and we are moving them into housing within 90 days on average. So to maintain this objective, we have a veteran case conferencing group that still meets every 2 weeks with our veteran partner agencies. And they have a by name list that they go through of veterans experiencing homelessness in San Antonio and Bexar County, and they work through them on a specific service plan based on individual needs. We're happy to report that just 33 unsheltered veterans were counted this year during our point in time count, which is our community's lowest count since we began closely monitoring the data in 2016 for the challenge. So the only issue with transferring this model to other populations is that veterans have their own set of dedicated resources, including medical care and housing vouchers. And that, unfortunately, isn't always the case for other groups, but it is an incredible example of what we can do with community support, political buy-in and engagement, collaboration, and funding proven targeted interventions. I want to quickly touch on chronic homelessness, which is defined as people who have a disabling condition and have been unhoused for the last 12 months. So this count has fluctuated a lot over the last few years, but we did see a 77% overall increase in this year's point in time count. However, you'll see the 4.5% number. The vast majority of that increase was in sheltered settings, and that is encouraging that at least while this number is increasing, that the majority of those that are the most vulnerable in our community are being moved into safer environments than being out on the streets. So we're working on two critical areas for this population where we need additional support. So first, there's a need to expand long-term supportive housing options, which we call permanent supportive housing, or PSH. Specifically, that moves people out of chronic homelessness and provides intensive coordinated services. Our current PSH programs have a 98% retention rate, which is great. That means they're working and incredibly successful, but on the other hand, that means openings on a month-to-month basis are extremely limited. We're talking 4 to 5 maybe. So the good news is we are gaining momentum to expand this needed resource with ARPA dollars, San Antonio's first housing bond, and the city's Strategic Housing Implementation Plan, or SHIP, if you've probably heard of it called, which includes a goal of developing 1,000 units of PSH in the next 5 years. Additional needs to help people experiencing chronic homelessness are options for medical respite or shelter with the capacity to meet the needs of people with severe mental health disorders, substance use disorders, or who are struggling with their activities of daily living, like using the restroom independently. There's even people on the street in the need of end-of-life or hospice care. We also look at homelessness in terms of vulnerable age groups. So when looking at this chart right here, it's important to know that all children, you see 0 to 17, 15.1%, all children and most older adults were counted in sheltered settings. So there was no children counted on the streets in an unsheltered setting for this year's point in time count. And fortunately, another great thing Haven for Hope does, they have a commitment to never turn away a family with a child. So they could present in the middle of the night, they could be full, and they will make a safe shelter intervention happen for that family. One of the bigger challenges is having affordable options that a family can sustain long-term as they move out of shelters, particularly for multi-generational families that need larger spaces than your typical efficiency 1 or 2 bedroom units. Locating sustainable, affordable housing options has become extremely and increasingly difficult with inflating rent prices over the last year or so in our community and nationwide. So for youth and young adults, we have a youth homelessness grant from HUD that funds several of our dedicated partners. And our Youth Action Board is a board of 17 to 24-year-olds that meet on a monthly basis, and they're comprised mainly of youth and young adults that have lived experience of homelessness. And they have been instrumental in creating and implementing programs to effectively serve this subpopulation. One project that we're really excited about, you'll see the logo and the website down there, is the Young Adult Stability and Support Center. And it's been open for about 2 months in downtown San Antonio. It operates out of Travis Park Church, and it's a partnership with SAM Ministries, SA Youth, and Corazon San Antonio. And it basically serves as a safe space for young adults to access critical services on their path to self-sufficiency. There are some concerning trends with older adults. We're seeing calls from people in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s who are on a limited income and who can no longer afford their current housing. And quality nursing homes, especially without funding, can be difficult to identify. And while we also see accessibility struggles for people who are unable to care for themselves, but we do have planned permanent supportive housing development that I'll tell you about later that is specifically going to address this group. Okay, I have a few other additional key findings from our point in time count that I wanted to address. So first is that Black or African American individuals are overrepresented by over 3 times proportional to San Antonio's population. And while other Texas cities have similar overrepresentations, it is still an alarming statistic, and it shows that we still have work to do in evaluating and making progress on equitable outcomes as part of our strategic plan for the next 3 years. Next is that someone's LGBTQ status can affect their likelihood of experiencing homelessness by twice as much according to national statistics. And especially you'll see this among the younger populations. So we believe the 7% number that you see up there is likely a severe undercount due to fear and stigma associated with talking about your status with a volunteer. And we're going to continue to work with our partners like Thrive Youth Center and on programs like the YAS Center to learn more and address these issues. Another one of our initiatives is called SOAR, which connects people to SSI, SSDI, and Medicaid to address the issue that the majority of people who are unsheltered, not having medical insurance, and not having access to regular medical care outside of emergency rooms. It's probably no surprise that young adults aging out of foster care often struggle to find stable housing, as 44% reported not having a stable place to live upon exit. And we're grateful for partners like Through Project and Bournemouth Youth Alternatives that help us identify this population early on so we can get them connected to the correct resources. We did see a small decline in domestic violence over the last 2 years. We've heard locally that it's still been an issue throughout the pandemic and currently. So it's important that we continue to monitor this number through our community dashboard to make sure what the new baseline is over the next few years. And finally, to go along with the idea, nothing about us without us, we added questions to this year's survey to elicit direct feedback from what are the most pressing needs among our unsheltered population. We don't want to sit behind closed doors and make decisions that affect people's lives without hearing from them directly. And the 3 most common responses by far were housing, ID recovery, and healthcare. So let's talk about what to do if you encounter someone experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So first, you shouldn't feel obligated to give money or food, and remember you can always walk or drive away if you feel uncomfortable. While many could just use a person to talk to, it's often best to leave that to the professionals. So if you're concerned for the individual's well-being, call the city's Homeless Connections hotline or 311, and they work directly with our outreach workers in the cities and can dispatch them for a welfare check and ensure they're connected to the available resources. So a number like 911, and officers correct me if I'll misspeak here, but 911 should be reserved for life-threatening emergencies, crimes in progress, fires, and the like. If it's just somebody that's minding their own business, but you still are concerned for them, that's when you call 311 or the Homeless Connections hotline. Another unique aspect of our local homeless response system is that in addition to our local nonprofit organizations having street outreach teams, each district has a designated street outreach worker employed by the city's Department of Human Services, and the one for D1 is here today, who I'll introduce later. Okay, so recent successes, just a few I want to run through, share some successes, some of the good things that have been going on in our community. So first of all, San Antonio, Bexar County, we were one of the first communities in the nation to launch a coordinated homeless prevention response system to assist people experiencing housing insecurity during the pandemic. We also partnered with both local housing authorities to distribute 315 emergency housing vouchers, which are being used to rehouse people experiencing literal homelessness or fleeing domestic violence. And next I'd like to talk about our housing surge. So the housing surge was a concentrated effort to house a large number of people in a short time frame. So basically we saw in the second half of 2021, we had a bunch of expiring federal money and resources combined with just an unprecedented need in our community. So we came up with what's called a housing surge to expedite the housing process, get rid of common barriers that we see in rehousing people. And it was truly a group effort. The city got involved, all of our nonprofit providers worked, and we really made some great changes for the moment and that will also be carried permanently in our response system. And our goal was to house 500 people in 5 months, and we ended up making 660 permanent housing placements in that time frame. Our diversion program, that is flexible funding to help people immediately reclaim their housing with a one-time intervention without having to enter a shelter or housing program. We were able to divert 301 households from homelessness in 2021. This all started from a grant through USAA, and we're incredibly grateful. The pilot program was so successful that the city took it over and made it a long-term part of our homeless response system. And so again, it's flexible funding. So it's for people that have not identified, they're newly experiencing homelessness, they haven't identified a place to stay that night, and we're able to get creative with this funding. So it could be something as simple as, they're out on the streets today, but they have something set up a week from now, so we can get them a hotel room for a week to make sure we bridge that gap in their housing. They could need transportation to stay with a family member, and so we will cover the cost for transportation. And then many other things. It could be something like a damage deposit or a security deposit to make sure that they are able to reclaim their housing without having to go into the response system in the first place. So it was all meant to decrease the inflow, and this was critical at the beginning of the pandemic because all of our shelters had to overnight cut their capacities in more than half. So also on our list is, so over the last 5 years, San Antonio and Bexar County's funding has increased by over $5 million, and we received our largest year-over-year increase this last year. So I think that's signs that we're not perfect, but we are doing a lot of things well. And we have also elevated the need for more permanent supportive housing through our involvement with the Strategic Housing Implementation Plan, the 2022 Housing Bond, which our executive director served as co-chair on the committee, and which also includes $25 million dedicated to PSH. So you've heard me talk about permanent supportive housing a lot, and I'm excited to share about Town Twin Village. So some of you longtime residents may remember the Town Twin Drive-In Theater on the city's east side. So they've converted that site, and this Housing First Community Coalition, they converted that site into a site-based permanent supportive housing project. And that's a big win for us because it's going to be a 205-unit combination of apartments, tiny homes, RV trailers, and it's going to represent our community's first site-based permanent supportive housing for chronically homeless older adults. And site-based means that treatment services are going to be brought to them or housed on site, which eliminates common transportation needs for somebody having to find transportation to go to an appointment across town. Studies have shown that investments in permanent supportive housing projects like this can lower public costs associated with hospitals, jails, and shelters, and help chronically homeless individuals lead more stable lives. And I didn't say it, but they're going to be opening up phase 1 of that project later this year, which will include all the RV sites. So follow them online if you want to learn more and see their progress. So opportunities to get involved. You can always sign up for our monthly newsletter. We don't spam you. We send out one monthly communication each month, and it's the first Thursday of the month. And it's just high-level things. We share what's going on with partners, opportunities to get involved. And you can also follow us on our Facebook page. We use it for that as well. You can volunteer with Sarah or our partners, and I'll especially say our direct service provider partners have really started ramping up their volunteer programs again coming out of the pandemic, and they rely on those heavily to make sure they're meeting their daily needs. You can join our bi-weekly community collaboration call. That is Wednesdays at 9:15 a.m. It's a 45-minute call. It's open to the community, but it's co-hosted by Sarah, the Department of Human Services, and Haven for Hope. And we go over updates for our homeless response system, and we have about 30 to 50, depending on the week, homeless service providers on the call that share updates about their organization as well. So it's a good way to stay in the know. And if you're interested, you can shoot me an email. You can watch the Beyond Homeless documentary. So Beyond Homeless documentary was originally created to cover the homelessness issues in San Francisco that they were experiencing. And they look in that documentary at Haven for Hope, how that was created, how it came about, and how Haven for Hope operates. And my next point here is that if you haven't had the opportunity to tour Haven for Hope, I strongly recommend it. It's every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Most people just think of it as an emergency shelter, but it truly is a transformational campus. They house 80+ organizations on site. So once somebody walks through those doors, they have access to all the services and support that they need to get back on their feet and get back into the community. So strongly encourage that. You just have to show up at the Volunteer Center at 10 a.m. and you can go check it out. And another thing with Haven, you'll hear if you do interact with people experiencing homelessness, and even amongst the community, you'll hear a lot of misconceptions or maybe things that might have been true in the past, but Haven for Hope has made a lot of developments over the year and a lot of changes. So one that comes to mind is nobody sleeps outside at Haven for Hope. They have something called the courtyard, which is their true lowest barrier entry, but everybody sleeps inside on their own mat, and they have their own space. So that's something to remember. Key dates. So the big give this year, that is big for not only us nonprofits, homeless service providers, but pretty much every nonprofit in the city. They are changing that this year from one single day to it's still a 24-hour period, but it's a Thursday, Friday. So if you ever do give or feel led to give, that's a great time to do it. And and there's a lot of opportunities to further your money through matching programs. Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, that is always held annually the week before the week of Thanksgiving, and Sarah puts out a community calendar for that. And Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week is just exactly what it says, wear awareness about the hunger and homelessness issues in our community. And so we'll have volunteer opportunities, educational events, and the like that week. And then Giving Tuesday is November 29th. That's another big giving day for a lot of our organizations. So I appreciate you all having me again. I hope this is part of an ongoing conversation. So I have cards with me, or feel free to take a picture. You can reach out to me. We pride ourselves on being an unbiased resource and connecting people to the appropriate place. So before we go into Q&A though, I wanted to introduce two special guests here. Oh, first, let me just say, we talked about Mario Bravo and his office, and I want to just commend him on the job, because really from practically day one, when you took office, you started engaging with our response system. And I've personally seen a lot of improvements, and it's been nice to have that relationship with you all, and putting on meetings like this where we can have discussions and just talk to each other and learn more. Because every time we do one of these, we learn something too, and it helps dictate what we work on and our priorities. So again, thank you for having me, and I will let Dawn and Valerie introduce themselves, and then we have Ramon from the Department of Human Services. Thank you.
I'll try to be quick because I want to let Valerie share a little bit more. But my name is Dawn White-Foster. I'm with CAM, Christian Assistance Ministry. It's a local nonprofit. I've been there 12 years. It's been around for 45 years. And what we want you all to know is we like to call ourselves the emergency room of social services. So anyone can come into CAM at any time and get help with really basic needs, help with utility assistance, prescriptions, food and clothing, and that sort of thing. But for the purpose of today's discussion and the concept of homelessness, we kind of realized really with COVID that we were serving the unsheltered street homeless in a way that I don't know, before then I somehow didn't have an epiphany about what that meant. But when COVID hit and a lot of the churches started shutting down, we agreed to be a homeless HUD. We're less than about 2 miles from this location, so I really wanted to come to your homeowners association because I wanted you to know that we're focused on probably the most difficult cases. When we talk about chronic homelessness, I'm not even speaking about someone that is at Haven. In fact, we consider that a win when we're able to get someone to take a ride with us and enter Haven. But what we realized that there are a lot of people living on the streets in chronic homelessness that had severe barriers. And so even if they wanted to make the decision, and sometimes they tell you they don't, but I always say, I don't believe it, that no one really wants to choose a lifestyle that's so hard and such a struggle. And that we find even with some of our hardest clients that when we get along with them, when we've built that relationship, they will start crying and telling us they know they deserve better, they want better, but they just don't know how to make that happen. So one of the things that CAM does is we have a campus 6 days a week. We provide porta potties. We realize that you need to have restrooms for people, provide some dignity. We provide showers, and we provide food 6 days a week. We also have an indoor area where clients can come in and get their mail, because you can imagine if you don't have any place for mail to be sent, how can you even begin the process of getting off the street or getting a job? And then I realized that a lot of our clients weren't even able to come inside to even access some of those things. And so when COVID hit and we kind of moved outside, we started realizing who our friends were, who these unsheltered homeless clients were that we knew by name, but we started knowing them deeper and richer. And that's when Valerie worked for another team doing outreach, and I would call her other team all the time and say, you don't need to do outreach, they're all over here, they're in my parking lot. There's 500 people here, and they have a lot of questions, and they need them answered so that they can do something different. And so we hired Valerie about 1.5 years ago, and we started focusing on the most chronic, difficult cases, even cases of individuals that you might even call a nuisance, because we recognized that we needed those we were caring for also to be able to live and exist in our coexisting neighborhoods. and that we needed to not have our help cause a hindrance to someone else. And so Valerie, and we have a new team member, Heather, as well as some other team members who run showers and things like that, started doing outreach in a more significant way. And I want to just let her share what that means, and then I wanted to tell you we have some flyers that we want to leave over there, that if you ran into someone that was saying they needed a shower or they were hungry or tired, that if they could just make it to where we're located, not only are we available, but Corazon Ministries is next door to us. First Presbyterian Church has a program called the Kingdom Restoration Laboratory, and Cub is just down the street. So if you made it to 110 McCullough from 7 o'clock to 7 at night, you would have breakfast, lunch, dinner, restroom, showers, and hopefully a conversation with an outreach worker like Valerie or someone else that might help you begin that transformation. And I can tell you it can take 6 months to 9 months to years. And some of the work we do is sending people back to their families. There's some fantastic stories about that. I ran into a guy who said to me one time, I wouldn't be homeless if I could get home. And I thought, well, Lordy, let's get you home. What does that mean? And then we're doing a special program with the SAPD downtown called One Life at a Time that is really focused on some of the most difficult chronic homeless that are causing trouble in the neighborhood. So I'll let Valerie share what she wants to share about her work. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey guys, I'm Valerie. I've been outreaching since about 2014. Person with lived experience, and I mention that because that's I'm going to use the word vital tool that I have in my belt to work with someone who is experiencing homelessness or been homeless. I'm in sobriety, in recovery, things like that. When it comes to outreaching, I really wanted to be here for the Q&A because I know there's a lot of questions that come up with it. There's a kind of stigma with homelessness, obviously. What we're focused on with our outreach is, like Don was saying, the chronically homeless. So you may have seen these individuals screaming on the corner or talking to themselves or not even knowing what day or time it is. So what we've learned and what we've done is basically work these case by case. It's kind of like if you walk into an elementary school, every student is different. You're going to have some that go off to universities, you're going to have some that drop out, you're going to have some that have different responses. Every case that we work with, all of our clients are different, so we're very focused on trust relationships because those relationships are what's key to have them make that decision. So we find ourselves working these cases of people who really don't fit the mold of places or systems that are already in place. A lot of our clients don't fit the mold for Haven for Hope because they can't care for themselves. They have significant behavior issues. They have significant untreated mental health issues. So what we do is spend a lot of energy and time with building those relationships. We just started a pilot program with PD, with Bike Patrol specifically downtown, and it's called One Life at a Time. And what we're doing is focusing on one person at a time, putting a lot of energy and time and love and relationship into that person. These are high utilizers downtown. We're getting constant calls from stakeholders. We're getting constant calls. They're constantly getting calls of EMS, first responders, and things like that. ER visits, and they're just kind of going like this in the system, in the jail system, in the psych, in the mental health system. So what we do is we really find ourselves bucking that system because every case is different. So if that means, I'm making calls to, getting with the DA's office or, psych, a mental health unit, we work really closely with mental health units. I'm sure you'll heard about the core team that just came out who has been very responsive in a positive way. So we find ourselves working with that, and we just started that pilot program to start working those individuals who have been out there in the streets for a significant amount of time.
And we put a flyer out about that. The One Life at a Time program focuses on those core individuals, but also one-offs. So the police might get a phone call from the Greyhound bus, and someone is acting, outrageous at the Greyhound bus. And does the police spend 3-4 hours dealing with them, arrest them, put them in, let them out, or maybe they can bring that person over to our location and Valerie and her team start to figure out what's going on. Maybe that's somebody who was displaced. We had an individual like that who was put on a bus in like Amarillo, was making so much noise they kicked him off the bus. He'd had a stroke, he had seizures, and this hospital had kicked him out to go to his son in like McAllen. So that was a case we could resolve.
he might have been on the streets for I don't know how long, or put in jail for no reason when, through Valerie's help, we were able to house him in a hotel that day, call his son, and then she and I both stayed at the hotel until his son could arrive. So there's just cases like that all the time that occur. And even cases where the police call because someone has defecated themselves and they need clothing and shirts and things like that, we're able to provide those things. So we're hoping that rather than police having to do that kind of police work with somebody who's experiencing homelessness, we can kind of fill in the gaps and then they can do the kind of work that they need to do. Did you want to say? Yeah. So anyway, we did want to tell you all, if you experience someone who's struggling like that, definitely, we left some phone numbers, the homeless hotline, but you could call Pam and say, you know, our neighborhood is experiencing a crisis with this person. It's a deep struggle and we need some help with it, and we're willing to just sort of do some intervention on the street, and or even let you all know what is going on with the client. We had that one in what's going to be newly District 1, but in the Harmony Hills area, that a lot of people were involved in that area, and it was causing a lot of consternation. And Valerie and Heather were able to go out and really sort of explain to them what was going on with that individual and what was already being done, and that they shouldn't be bringing him loads of food to his truck and things like that. That was actually causing a problem versus being a help. So anyway.
And I encourage you all to get those flyers. I spent a few hours this morning not outreaching to clients, but I actually outreached to a specific area of businesses. And it was really surprising to learn how many businesses just didn't know about outreach. They've never had outreach walk into their businesses, and they're very significant businesses with heavy populated homelessness around there. So please keep those flyers, and you know, a lot of times it's just the community education piece that they just need to know where these services are, where people can go, that outreach is out here, how to get connected and things like that.
Before we go into questions, Ramon, can you introduce yourself to the group too and tell them about your role?
What I do? Hello, I'm Ramon Gonzalez, and I'm the outreach worker assigned to District 1, and I've been doing this for a little bit over a year. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and my approach to helping our neighbors is kind of like Dawn mentioned, is all about relationship building. So I'm trying to build a trusting relationship with folks that have been involved in systems that may have mistreated them, such as justice systems, foster systems, CPS systems, all kinds of systems that sometimes may not treat people fairly. So my approach is to just get to know them first. I was approached a lady staying not far from here, in front, someone's at an abandoned house porch, and she would not talk to me for about 2 to 3 months. Consistently showed up with water or snacks, and she consistently refused them until sometime in the fall, she said, "Hello, I'm sorry, I've been mean to you, you've been nothing but nice." She accepted water, and we sat down and had a conversation. That was a win. That was a huge win. And I consistently continue to do that. It may be another while before I can get her shelter, or to trust me enough to move her to the next level. That's my job. And how I do that is I listen to listen, not to respond. Right? I respect their space, I am polite, and I try to walk in their shoes. There's people out here, there's someone's mother, father, grandparent, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, best friend, right? Someone may be looking for them. So that's my approach, and I show interest. So they have an interest, whatever that interest is, dogs, horses, birds, whatever. I ask them, tell me about your pup. What's his name? How old is he? Right? Building a relationship, trusting a relationship. So we have an app called Outreach Grid, and in Beacon Hill we have 14 active encampments. 2 or 3 of them are on private properties. I don't remember, but we have about 14 active encampments.
San Pedro Park is an attraction. You have I-10 on one side, and not far from the southern part of your border is 35 in San Pedro. These areas are highly populated, very dense. They offer the reason is because they offer protection from the environment, the highways do. It's a high traffic area, so they can solicit contributions. And there's a couple of places where they can go in, get food, get water, sometimes maybe buy alcohol or whatever. But they can go into these places, buy stuff. You also have, not far from here, Haven, Salvation Army, American GI Forum, SAM Ministries, Family Service Association. They all have offices near and around San Pedro. So those they're attracting traffic. Sometimes it's to get help and have appointments and those kinds of things. But they'll attract a lot of folks. What I can do is I can make referrals to shelters, treatment facilities, or to try to meet the clients' goal, help them meet their goals. Okay. Some of the challenges is that they don't want the services that we have to offer. Sometimes, again, that'll take time. What I cannot do is that I cannot come somewhere and grab them and take them with me. That's kidding. That's against the law, and I know that, right? But sometimes the expectation is you call outreach and they're going to come and take them. I can't do that. I can ask them to move. I can ask them to be good neighbors. And what I mean by that is to keep it small, keep it quiet, keep it clean, and no drama. Okay? I also cannot respond to medical risk. If someone's passed out, I got a call, someone's passed out on the sidewalk. I'm not EMS. That would probably be a more appropriate call to EMS, right? Because it's going to take me a while to get there. I don't have the medical equipment. I used to be a medic in the Air Force, but that was a long time ago, and I don't do that anymore. What we do is also provide hygiene items, water, food, those kinds of necessities. We don't give cell phones away or anything like that. Some of these are luxury items that sometimes we hear that we're giving away, and we're not. We don't do that. And if someone is taking things from from houses or something like that, again, those are crimes. They get reported to the police. So I can't go solve a crime and take them with me to jail or anything like that. I can ask them to be good neighbors. That's all I can do. Any questions? Thank you.
How do you get, you were saying, for example, there was a woman on a porch that you worked with for so much. How do you get connected with the people? Who clues you in? Like, if, for example, we have somebody in the neighborhood that we need outreach, we don't know if anyone's working with them or not. Do we let you know about an individual? Not in immediate crisis, but in the situation.
So I think Billy mentioned calling 311 or the homeless connection. We actually office in the same office, same building. So a lot of times, if you call them, they'll call the appropriate district person, and we respond typically same day. 311, we have a little longer response period, but we will respond to those. As outreach workers in all our districts, most of us know where everyone's at. Every now and then we'll get a call, there's someone in some alley or somewhere, and when I go there and I ask them, they'll say to me, I've only been here about 2 or 3 days. So usually that's based on the observed situation, usually is what they say.
So that homeless connections hotline is the best first call.
You'll get a faster response.
Yeah, and because they will connect not only to the district outreach workers, but also to CAM, to SAM, and the other nonprofit providers that do outreach as well.
They'll do all the referrals.
Yeah, any questions for any of us? Valerie, Dawn? Yes?
Do you work in tandem with the different districts, does CAM work with different district homeless outreach people?
Yeah.
Like y'all are on the same page and?
It's just for you all to know as far as big picture. So we're a part of a homeless huddle. We meet every other Friday. High-level leaders representing the nonprofits, the Department of Human Services, as well as city manager's office. And then you all, the outreach workers, they do case conferencing to talk about specific clients, because we may, like 5 of us may be interacting with the client, because they're mobile sometimes. And we may all be having a similar problem. Like, we'll say, we just had to ban so-and-so, and then they'll say, oh, he just, was in the street over here. We've gotten him to go to rehab. So that is definitely,
Yeah, so that's
How-
COCY, the Street Outreach Case Conference. Is that other week?
Every other Thursday.
Every other week, they meet and they talk about it on a case-by-case level. And then we have our Coordinated Entry and Outreach Advisory Committee, and they meet, I think it's every other week as well. And they talk about, on the program level, how we're gonna solve things. So we try to attack a few different fronts there.
So, I don't know if y'all have ever encountered this in our neighborhood, and this may be something, I know that y'all can't do anything about it, but maybe companies probably could. We have to get no trespassing signs first put in place, or our SAFFE officer cannot go in there and remove these homeless people. So, about 2 months ago, it's been ongoing, they're living in the house and in the underpass where the train bridge goes over San Pedro. Our SAFFE officer went there because some of the neighbors were complaining that there's some people living there, camping out. So she goes, she arrests the one girl that is pregnant at 2 and 2 weeks because she had outstanding warrants, thank God. Because I don't know what would have happened if she didn't run from the house. But so the other guy that they didn't arrest, he goes, well, we have permission from the owner to stay here. So she gets on the phone with the owners because she has it on her phone now because it's been an ongoing problem. And the owner says, yes, we did indeed let him stay there. So then she's like, well, I can't do anything. So I asked, I know that everybody here probably knows that in the dangerous, if a home is deemed dangerous, the city can issue code violations and get people that are renting there out because they think it's dangerous. But apparently, homeless people can live in a house that is dangerous if the owner gives them permission. And I think this is a problem, and I don't know. I brought it up with Michael Shannon. I don't know how we address that, but if it's happening in our neighborhood, I can see that happening in other places. And to me, it just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know if y'all come up encountered that anywhere else.
no.
Yeah, that's a very tricky situation. I wonder if adult protective services may be able to.
Well, they don't
Yeah, I
have
know.
any money, so.
Yeah.
I mean, unless somebody was in a terrible situation, even then, we'd probably have to help them figure out where the person
And that is
would go.
something that, I think you've talked about that. You could go visit, but if they're on personal property, you can't do anything. But if you go by and they're out and about, that's when you can talk to
Well, the
them.
guys selling drugs, they found a dead body back there last month, and the guys dealing drugs out of the home.
This is not me, Danielle, I'm just gonna interject.
Remind us to Tara.
Well, this sounds like it's definitely a criminal situation.
Yeah, of course.
And we are all for, even though we love our clients and we know that many of them are involved in things that you might consider criminal, when it starts to cause criminal activity for the neighborhood and hurt other people, then, we just think the police have to deal with that. In our case,
Well, that's what
That's
they were trying
outrage.
to do, but they couldn't arrest them because the owner gave them permission to stay
yeah,
there.
that's a
Mary,
different one.
why don't we coordinate with development services? If there's no power or water to the house, like if the house is just shut off, then that's gonna be like a standard of living issue. So we can coordinate with development services, maybe Ramon and your SAFFE officer, and see if we can get that addressed in that way.
I know where that is, I know where that is.
Okay.
Anyone else have anything else?
I've got a question. So if somebody runs across somebody who's out on a sidewalk or street and they appear to be passed out, do you dial 911?
Yeah.
Do you dial?
that would be 911 for sure. If it's a life-threatening emergency, either for that person or somebody else, recommend 911.
Just a general question, and maybe I missed the explanation of it, but the counting that is done, count, how do you know you're finding everyone to count?
So we are very cognizant that the point-in-time count is imperfect. But Ramon mentioned outreach grid. So anytime an outreach worker goes and has an interaction with somebody, it is recorded in an outreach grid. So when we divide the entire Bexar County into 70+ zones, we have all the known encampments marked on there, exactly their exact location, including details like this back behind the dumpster area or wherever, and the last known date of interaction. So the teams of volunteers are all partnered with an SAPD officer plus an experienced team lead who works with the homeless service provider. So the volunteers are guided there, and they're instructed to go count the known encampments first, and then after that, the officer leads them into other areas that are these commonly see. So we do our best, but we know with that many volunteers involved, and considering it's a single night, I mean, from a Tuesday to a Wednesday, your count could differ quite drastically depending on weather conditions, things like that. So that's another reason why we're moving to the quarterly data to talk about point-in-time count, but also, give you more accurate reports during the year based on street outreach data.
Thank you.
Questions?
I got 100 more questions. Okay, so you all mentioned building relationships, and I know that's really important, and it takes a lot of time. And so, Valerie, let's say that there's an individual who's experiencing homelessness, and you've been working with them on a regular basis for the last 6 months, and I dial 311, and maybe they end up sending Ramon out there, or maybe they send up Morgan or somebody who's perfectly good at outreach, but doesn't have a relationship with that person. What is the fastest way in the system to figure out that Valerie's the best person? That Valerie has a history with this individual and has a relationship with this individual, and that you could be the most effective in this situation.
Yeah, so that, the homeless management information system, so once that call is made, they will look up that individual and they'll see right there, oh, they're working with SAM Ministries or they're working with CAN Ministries. Valerie visited them last week, in fact. So they will direct them there instead of just sending them to a random outreach provider.
And even the caseworker can do that. Like we had a case like that where Patty from Harmony Hills was troubled by someone that was living off the Target near Bitters. And I said, okay, I'll send Valerie out there, even though I knew there was a DHS caseworker in that area, but I was like, go out there and see what it's like. She immediately looked at HMIS and could see there was a history with that individual, with other caseworkers in the community and what had been done with him. And so it wasn't bad that she went out there, because she could even say that, look, I know you're, to say, we know what's going on, mister.
Which is like Ramon was saying, like how we know our areas. If I see a new face, that's the first thing I pull them up from my phone in the system to kind of see their history, how long have they been homeless, who are they working with, and then redirect them and see if we can. Because sometimes when we're working together, I mean, it takes a village to help one person. Like it absolutely takes a village. Like so, maybe I can provide something that, or Ramon can provide something or whatever, So.
And maybe they're on the cusp of getting housing. There were some guys that showed up at CAM one day that I could totally see weren't our normal clients. He was telling me something about housing, so we brought him back to Valerie, who sets up shop on Thursdays in our little chapel. And he had lost his phone. He was already on HomeLink. He had a caseworker at another nonprofit, and they were in fact looking for him because of his housing situation. But see, he lost his phone, and then he didn't remember who his caseworker was. And if we didn't have that kind of communication and that kind of record keeping, it could have all been lost. And that was quickly a client that could be moved on to the other organization serving him.
The system all of you use?
Yes, we all use the same one.
Any homeless service in the county, yeah.
And CAM uses it for all of its clients, not just the ones who are doing outreach, but if you just come in to get clothing or groceries, we put you in that same system as well.
So, what information is most useful for us to gather when we call in a family or an individual who's experiencing homelessness? Because I know that each of the homeless service providers have their niche, their specialty, right? Some of you are best equipped for when they have kids. Some of you are not able to accept an individual experiencing homelessness if they have a pet, but some people do have a place for them to take their dog or whatever. And so what are all the things, what's all the information that we in the community should be collecting when we call in?
First of all, do they want to go anywhere? Do they want help? Even if they don't want help, of course, we can still respond, but we get that a lot. I get calls like they need it, and I'm not talking to the actual person experiencing homelessness. So what kind of help do they need? Are they actually open to temporary shelter? Things like that. But again, if you're, these situations are different because you might be dealing with someone that's not approachable. But location is huge. And description. And
Picture, maybe you could take one from a distance if you could.
If they have, IDs, that's a qualifier.
Yeah, and it all depends whether if you decide to talk to that person and engage with them or observe from a distance. But to answer your question, the more the information, the better. But the location the specific location is probably one of the most important.
Name and date of birth is helpful because an outreach worker could look ahead of time and say, oh, we've got him in the system. It looks like Endeavors, he's got a home link and they're looking, we're housing for him. So, it could be that name and date of birth can be very helpful. If that's somebody wanting to.
If you're reporting an encampment, what I would like to know is what was your vantage point that you saw this encampment from? Because, and this didn't happen here, we were out in D4, and we got a call that there was an encampment between these two schools in this field, but the field was huge. And halfway through the field, we're like, where did they see this from? And so we backed out, drove around, and that kind of stuff. And I thought that would have been perfect, good information to have. For what was your vantage point that you saw this encampment from? It may not be a problem in D1, but there is some green spaces in D1. So.
That's a good point. So should we, say we see a new homeless person, we never approach them. So do we call, our homeless outreach person? Can we call y'all and say, we noticed somebody new in the neighborhood? Because terms like unapproachable, some terms like that help the neighbors know what has been done with that person. Like, oh, we've contacted them, we have their name, we have their information, and we're at this point with them. But, to say they're non-approachable, that tells everyone that y'all have been trying to reach out to that person, but they're not letting you, you're hitting a brick wall with them, right? Is that what that means?
And I was just going to say, and also, do you need to call on every person that you see that's new or homeless? If they're not causing an issue and they're mild-mannered and it's not really causing your neighborhood anything, I probably wouldn't call, because the level of need far exceeds the ability to respond to it. But if somebody is acting outrageous or seems lost or confused or is scary in some way, then definitely call. But just because someone, I don't know, I use this as an example at Blanco on West Avenue at a Marshall's, there's a guy who sits in front of it and makes beads, and you can buy a bead thing from it, but he's very unobtrusive. I'm sure everybody there knows him, and it'd be nice if he moved on, but it's not causing an issue.
Right, I get that. But if you see him, I saw this new girl in the parking lot right up there by Volare, and she was obviously really drunk, just sitting in the parking lot. She was surrounded by, but I'm sure she had just gone into the liquor store and gotten the little minis, and it's like, my heart just broke. She's just, she's helpless, she's, would that be in that situation? Should we just leave her? It just, it's so horrible.
My viewpoint differs a little bit. I still recommend, calling. Odds are that an outreach worker is already familiar with them. And my thing is that it may be sustainable, you know, their situation today, maybe even for years they're going to get by fine, but because they have a routine, they have support systems, but eventually something's going to happen, and that's, you know, trauma happens when you are unsheltered. It's a very common place. So even though they may not be interested today, tomorrow, I still think the more touch points they can have with an outreach worker, the better. But of course, we are going to focus on the individuals in the most need, the ones that are in, you know, dire situations. But
I have a question about the prevention of homelessness.
okay.
So I saw in your flyer that you have a thing about prevention. Understandably so, it costs something like $75,000 a person who is homeless. So I'm curious, what are the preventative things to look for? Because it is easy for us to spot somebody, possibly who is literally, that's the word we use, literally homeless.
Right.
Prevention, you can't really see.
Yeah.
So what are your recommendations?
That's a good question. I would say get to know your neighbors, because it could be somebody that in plain sight, I'm involved in our HOA in D1, and there was a report of somebody that didn't have power at their house and they were just getting by, didn't tell anybody. So get to know your neighbors, have those conversations. But yeah, to know the risk factors. I mean, people that are on limited incomes, that still have a house payment, things like that. If you know that somebody's been laid off, and that's when you can pass along prevention resources. Is anybody familiar with sacred.org? Okay, that's a great website. They have a dedicated page for homelessness and eviction prevention that leads you to our nonprofit providers. And so that's another, and that's you can share that with somebody for everything. They have a whole gamut of compassionate resources, whether it's food insecurity. I mean, it goes down the road. But that's where I would say the most, just a simple conversation.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
I just wanted to cut this off because it seemed like it still has some good questions going on, but we are running pretty late at this point. So, one last one. If anybody's got one last one, I'll let it in. Somebody's going to strike me. Good? Okay. I want to thank all of you for coming out. Billy, Valerie, Don, and Ramon. That was really interesting. That's why I learned so much. Not just the usefulness of the information we have now, but also it was pretty fascinating to see how this is clearly not just a job for all. The passion for what you do is very evident, so that was pretty inspirational to see. So thank you all for coming out. Going back to more typical business, I'm going to ask y'all as the assembly. Normally we go into committee reports and some rep reports. We're running pretty late. Do you want that, or do you just want to wrap it up?
And take cookies.
Yeah, I'm going to say.
I'm not taking them home, please.
There we go. Everyone has to get some cookies.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to join Wilmington. We have a monthly Third Friday Happy Hour this Friday. If anybody doesn't already see the details on it, give me after the meeting. We'll let you know when that is. And the week after that, we've got our movie in the park again. We just got it from last one. So, all right. Thank y'all.